Part of a digital record.
It's definitely sitting in Fullerton.
All right, now it works.
And you are on.
What's that?
You're down another register from yesterday.
Yeah. I'm ready to start singing dwarven music now. Far over the misty mountains cold.
Yay! Concert. Nice.
Yeah, right. I'll bring my guitar next time.
Okay.
I listen. I play the guitar. I hold it and it makes noise, and that's playing. So, anyway, good morning. What are we talking about today? It's
Breaking up with an old series and starting a new one. Sort of.
Why are we waiting so?
really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Storytelling, I think.
So
Right.
that's the next
Let's
one.
do the next one.
Whatever you want to talk
Something
about.
really,
Yeah, whatever you want to talk about. That's what
What is storytelling? Recipes that work.
Recipes that work.
Recipes that work.
Right.
New stories, new characters, and fan expectations.
What
Right.
works?
No, I don't. I do all of my cooking. My requirements for cooking a meal is that I have to be able to get it ready in 60 seconds or less. Well, back then I would actually use a crock pot. And you can use crock pots for a lot of things. But these days I only have to cook for myself and the dog. So 60 seconds or less is my rule.
What happened to the significant other?
Oh, she's my ex-significant other at the moment, so.
Ooh, sorry.
Oh, well, it's okay.
My loss.
It was an amicable thing, so. Which is a relative thing, of course. That's like saying a relatively short and painless war. But anyway, okay. I've got a friend who actually accidentally arrived 2 hours early in Florence, Italy, and her friend, who she went to her house, is not home, so she's stuck on a doorstep in the rain.
And she wants you to help from here?
Yes, I'm no, it's not tricky because I can contact her friend on Facebook. She can't contact her friend on phone. She doesn't have access to Facebook, but they both have access to me, so I'm sending messages back and forth. Yes, I am. I'm a life-saving person guy. That's me. That's what I do. Heroes at work.
Be it swords
Okay.
or cell phones.
So we're talking about formulas that work. And I'm one of the people who would say formulas are the only thing that work. And when you find something that works, it fits a formula somewhere. And when you find something that works for, or at least if it works for a lot of people, it fits a formula somewhere. If only because human beings are basically wired the same way in terms of how our emotions interface with our reason, and in terms of why we like stories. Almost everybody likes stories. I would say not everybody likes them, because there's got to be some complete freaks out there who don't like stories at all. But generally speaking, people like stories, and there's a few stories that work really, really well. I think there's like about 7 different story plots. And ignore what they said in Amazing Spider-Man about there's only one story, who am I? That is, the self-discovery story is one of the story plots, and it is considered the weakest story plot. So whoever wrote that, they need to learn more about writing, because that just ain't so. Or at least I'll disagree with that right here and now. So watch, and I'm going to find out Joss Whedon wrote that or something. But if so, Joss Whedon is wrong, and he should know better. And also, I want to know exactly where self-discovery fit in with that rocket launcher in season 2 of Buffy. So.
Spider-Man is wrong.
Yeah, Jim Butcher says Spider-Man is wrong. Hey, Spider-Man's a great guy, but he's not a writer. But yeah, I think there's 7 different story types. I think mostly the one that gets used is the quest. Pretty much every story I write is a quest story, and that's just we need something, go get it, yay, and that's the story, you know. But really, what every story is a question, and the process of answering the question is the story. So I mean, even if it's a big story like the Lord of the Rings, it's still a question. You know, will Frodo destroy the ring and save the world from Sauron? Yes, and that's a 3,000-page yes answer to that story, to that question. But the process of answering the question, that's what a story is. And are we really supposed to talk about breaking up with series and moving on? No, okay.
Yeah, but breaking ground.
Oh, breaking new ground. Oh, well, all stories get written the same way. You've got to have characters who are pursuing a goal, and you've got to create characters that the audience can either really love or really despise, and or a mixture of both, preferably. That's how it's done. Go. Panel over.
Talk about your humor in your books.
Humor in books is easy because when you're out with friends and conversation goes by and you want to be witty and cool, but the next morning you wake up and you go, oh, I had an opportunity to say something so awesome right there. Okay? Or a month later you wake up and say that, and I missed it. But in books, you can go ahead and be witty and cool because you can go back into time and then put that cool witty thing in there. So it's easy to be funny and witty in books because you've got months and months and months to condense your wit into something that seems really clever and awesome in a little tiny space on the page, which is way easier than doing it in real time. If you know anybody who does it in real time, and both Shannon and Jay have real-time wit ability. They can fling that stuff right back at you with no pause whatsoever. That's handy because it sort of teaches you how that kind of person thinks. I can't actually fire back in those contests, but what I can do is be the straight man who makes an absolutely perfect target of himself, and I'm the only reason they look so good. It's all about me. But that's what that's doing wit and humor in books is pretty easy. Occasionally you've got to grab different bits and pieces of what kind of humor you're going to be working with. If I want to have a running joke, then I'll have to build the running joke and sort of write that into the book. Like the running gag with Harry walking back in during Turncoat. Harry walking back in on the frozen tableau of everybody in a Mexican standoff with each other. It just kept happening over and over and over. And that was one of those things that had a very mechanical construction process when I was putting it together. Something that I knew I wanted to keep happening when he came in, and to just be able to establish some sort of insanity. The other thing I think the important thing about humor is you've got to trust the audience to a great degree. So I can come in and Harry walks into that situation and discovers this completely insane circumstance, and you've got to let the audience wonder, how did that happen? And the audience is building the humor there, really. You're not actually doing it. You're just sort of giving them the pieces to build the humor for themselves. And that happens a lot with humor. You've got to extend a certain amount of trust to your audience to be able to add their own fun to it. But that's true with all writing. The writer, you can always tell when the writer doesn't trust the audience because you get too much explanation and too much reaction from characters, and they're building a laugh track into their writing, you can still be funny if you do it that way, but it's a little bit hand-handed, I think. I don't know. I don't give this stuff a lot of thought. Mostly I just go do it. And it's a matter of practice. It's a matter of taking chances. The first time you start writing humor, you're sitting there wondering, is this really funny? Am I just acting stupid? Are people going to laugh at this? And you've kind of got to get the attitude of, you know what? I'm going to step out on this tightrope, and everything's going to be fine. And that's what helps make you succeed, is the fact that knowing that you're going to walk on that tightrope, and it's not going to be a big deal, and you're going to be fun and awesome. But the fact that you know you're not when you get started is the big obstacle to getting in your way to having the right attitude.
I've got an idea for a bit of a redirect to save your voice if you're open to it.
You guys talk louder because my ears aren't awake.
Sorry. I have an idea for a bit of a redirect to save your voice if you're open to it.
To save my voice?
A bit of a redirect for this, since we're going to be in here for 2 hours.
We're only in here an hour, and then there's 2 hours.
And then there's all right. Well, anyways, the redirect is you can be reasonably certain that everyone in here mostly is a reader of yours in some way or another. Do you have any questions for us?
Do I have any questions for you? Oh, that's a great way to do this. Except now I have to think of questions, and now you're asking me to think, and that's way harder than talking.
The ears are waking up, the brain not even.
Yeah, my ears aren't even there yet. I know there was another question right here, though.
I'm just, pure brazenness is how you think you managed to sell the zombie T-Rex?
To a degree, yeah. And well, the zombie T-Rex, now there was a lot of building that went into that. Because I had to establish the rules of how zombies work, and make everybody convinced about them, and I actually had to put characters in there wondering, so how come we don't see zombie dogs and cats? Because that would be way easier to get zombie dogs and cat bodies. Oh, well, it doesn't work as well. But it works better if they're older, like that.
Or for that matter, the turkey on all of the entropy curses and blood right?
Yeah, that was pushing the boundary. I believe that was right at the edge of Looney Tunes territory. Yeah, that's the other thing is to learn to write humor. You've got to observe humor. And you've got to observe humor in a lot of different ways. I think watching classic Looney Tunes is a great way to start learning how bits and pieces of humor put together, because that's basically just one setup gag after another, and they just show you you can just watch the construction of the joke every time they run it. But yeah, what was Spock's definition of a joke? An anecdote with an unexpected ending. And that's pretty much the surprise ending is what makes a joke, or for that matter, a good tragedy. Hello, surprise ending at End of Dr. Horrible. But
so in the fantasy genre, long book series are pretty much the norm. And I think we've all read series where, as the books go on, quality can vary or drop off. Sometimes it comes back, sometimes it doesn't. One thing that you seem to have done is maintain a very high level of quality throughout. And what do you credit your success on that to?
A structured approach to writing. I have the same structure every time, and so I know I've got a solid foundation for my story. If you were at my writing class, I spent the entire day doing nothing except talking about how I write a non-fiction novel. And I went on for 5 hours and could have gone on probably another 5 talking about it. But I have the same approach. I don't look at writing as an art, I look at it as a craft. And I'm a craftsman, and I have to build a firm foundation for whatever it is I'm constructing. And so that's what I do when I go to approach it. I know that not all people look at writing that way, but it's the most useful way for me to look at it. Excuse me. And the useful thing about it is that one, you can produce on a schedule pretty well. And then two, you've got a good predictable result and a firm baseline from which to start experimenting from, so you can tell the differences of how something affects your readers. If I present a story, in a slightly different fashion in two different books, and I get a much stronger reaction in one book than I do in another, it's like, oh, okay, well, I know why, because I know exactly what changed between here and here, because I use the same structure in each story. And that is really, there's a difference between structure and formula. Formula is something that you just follow. Structure is something that you build, and you know how the forces at play are interacting with one another. It looks awfully similar from the outside, but the difference is in how you understand it when you're putting it together. So, I know that if I've got a character who is not making the correct impression on the reader, I know how to make impressions on a reader with a character, so I can go back in and tinker with it and say, okay, I didn't have quite a strong enough entry action for this character, or I did not solidly establish this character in its opening scene, because it's the character introduction that is the most critical part of establishing the character, and so I'll go back and fix it that way. other folks, if you don't understand how these psychological elements work in writing, then you don't have the structure you need to be able to fix it. So that's the big thing that, I mean, one of my proudest comments that I've gotten over the years, one of the bits of praise that I have taken most sincerely to heart, was from an Air Force A-10 fighter pilot, and she said, the great thing about these books is not that any one particular book is particularly awesome, but what in the Air Force we would call for a design sustained superior performance over time.
Awesome.
And there are some planes that just, even though they might not be overall awesome over time, they're always reliable and they always do exactly what you need them to do, and that's what these books do. And so that's one of my favorite compliments to get, because that was one of the things I set out to do when I started writing.
So even when you're doing more of a kind of a riskier approach, like having your character be dead for a novel, say, you're still following formula, you're still following using the structure.
I'm still building it from structure, yeah. And that was the big risk for Ghost Story, was that I was using a much different structure. So, basically instead of building a square house, I was building a triangular one in Ghost Story. So I still knew how the elements were at play, but I was using them in a very different manner than I normally use them. Harry was not going to be the guy kicking in doors, he was going to be the guy supporting the people who kicked in doors. And while that's something that you can do you can get away with that once in a while, like I can get away with that for one book in the story, I can't do that for multiple books.
We know you're alive now.
Is it? Okay. I always think Bill Cosby's Chicken Heart story whenever I hear it.
Read the Harry Dresden books, which of course are awesome. Resisted Alara for many years because I knew they couldn't possibly be as good. And then that's when I figured out that you were brilliant after I read them. Because they're as if they're written by a completely different person.
They're a very different book.
Yeah.
And The Cinder Spires is even much different than that. It's got a much different feel than that because, everybody's got that meter of voice and thought that is very different than kind of your standard character. Everyone has got that kind of polite phrasing that you get from Victorian era speech and so on, which I tried to give the same impression of it without actually doing the tedium of all of it, and hopefully that will carry over well. But it should be books that feel very different than the regular the Dresden Files or the Alara books. In terms of structure, I've tried to pace them more like Dresden. In that the story is happening inside a much more condensed area of space than they did in Alara, but since it's happening from multiple viewpoints, it'll have more of that feel of Alara where you've got many different characters involved in what's going on. Excuse me. Hang on, I have to rescue my friend from Florence. It'll take me just a second. I have to send her phone number. Okay, now it's raining. Oh my gosh. Okay, so how come I got a different message on the... All right, hang on. Oh, okay.
Everybody applaud after he finishes.
Okay, oh, good, okay, I can be the hero, yay.
Very different in this modern age.
I know, right? All right, the other key is behind the surfboard, don't tell anybody.
It's under a report. All the surfboards.
That'll make it easier.
I've never seen a surfboard in Florence.
Maybe we should add some to help obscure.
Florence is, not Florence, surfboard is a code word.
See, they do a lot of boogie boarding at that, but.
Well, maybe they call them like surfboard in Florence.
Oh my God, that's horrible. And my sister sent me a picture of my niece with the Bichons all piled up in a puppy pile.
Thanks for kidnapping.
To prove to me, here, it's right here. To prove to me that my dog is okay because she knows I worry about it.
Very good.
These adorbs. Okay.
Can you put the other mic on, please, sir?
All right.
Yeah, I think it's a signal interference from getting.
The cell phone, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That's right.
There is that. That's too loud. Okay, that's better. Okay, where were we? There was a quick spot of damsel rescuing, so.
Always gotta take time for
Question for us.
Here's your chance to find out what we want.
I didn't mean
I
it that
know what
way.
you guys want. You guys want me to write the Dresden Files faster. That's what you're saying.
You get a Nerf gun?
What's that?
You get a Nerf gun?
Oh, next time I'm bringing my own, man. I'm going to bring my own awesome customized Nerf gun next time. You know, none of this, maybe it shoots one dart, maybe it shoots 4 Nerf gun things.
People's questions would be like, I'm going to answer your question by shooting a Nerf gun at you, therefore I'm talking to you.
Yeah, boom, you, like that.
Sometimes there's a range, and if we fill the theater, he's not going to get to that.
Well, let's do
We were talking about structure earlier, and we're all writers. We're actually part of a writing group, and we'd like to pick your brain a little bit more about what you mean by how you structure your story.
Okay.
What are some of the elements that you were talking about, that understanding how they play together? Like, can you give a couple examples of what some of those elements are?
Okay, well, I did like 5 hours of this on but if you go, okay, first of all, if you go to jimbutcher.livejournal.com, I've got a bunch of articles on story structure that are for nothing else. And
Way down at the bottom.
they're actually intended for beginning first-time writers. And there's also some people that have put them together in PDF format so that they're all kind of in one place. But basically it starts with, you start with how you build a story. In the story, you start building your story from a story question. And the story question is a very simple one, and it's a fill-in-the-blanks kind of story question. When something happens that changes the status quo, your protagonist sets out to fix whatever it is that's going to fix the problem. But will he succeed when antagonist gets in the way and starts trying to interfere? So when a droid arrives on his uncle's farm bearing a message from a captured princess, Luke Skywalker sets off to rescue her from the Empire. But will he succeed when Darth Vader and a million stormtroopers and a giant Death Star all get in the way? And then the answer to the story is the answer to that question. It's however long the story is, it's answering that question. And making it seem like the answer to that question is in doubt is the whole purpose of telling a story. So everything you do in the story is in the service of answering that question and of making the reader wonder what that answer is going to be. So that's why my stories all kind of have, like you said, why they've done well consistently is because I build them from that same foundation of here's the story question. And then you start getting into the craft of, how do you write the beginning of a story? How do you write the elements, what are the elements of the middle of the story? How do you construct the end of the story? The end of the story is always constructed the same way too. And all the really great stories have this exact same in the end, the exact same structure in the end. You isolate your protagonist. You hit him with a great and overwhelming choice to pursue the goal he's been pursuing or to turn aside from it. You stick him in a completely dark moment where it looks like everything is going to fall all to bits, and then you unveil a dramatic reversal that is in keeping with the concepts of poetic justice to resolve the story. And that's how all the great stories, the ones that are really, really popular, really speak to people, are structured. And the same thing happens for Skywalker and everybody else. I mean, all the big stories fit into that structure of isolation, choice, dark moment, and reversal. So, once you understand that, and once you understand that those are the moving psychological parts behind the story, that's when you can start going, okay, now how do I make my moving psychological parts cool and different from other people? How do I use these same things in a new way that people haven't necessarily seen before? And basically the way it works is that when you use the structure correctly, you get the difference between stereotypes or cliches and archetypes. When you do it right, you're using archetypes, and when you do it incorrectly, everybody goes, "Oh, that's so cliche." So, and really, although really the difference between archetype and cliches is that cliches are archetypes plus cynicism. So. So really, what your job as the storyteller is you're trying to get people to abandon their cynicism. You're trying to get them to suspend that disbelief. And, ha! I'm a hero. He says you are my hero. Yay.
Independent verification. Jim is here.
Okay, here we go. I feel good now. It is awesome when you get to do little things to be a hero. One of my great heroic moments happened at a convention, and it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I hear just from the hallway outside, doop, 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 doop. And then a little bit closer, doop, 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 doop. And then at my door, doop, 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 doop. And I go to the door, and there is in the hallway a 2-year-old boy with like waist-length red hair. Just beautiful red hair, and he's just dead in the hallway. And I open the door and look down at him, and he's just dead in the hallway, just looking up at me. He doesn't say anything. I'm like, "Hi, buddy, are you lost?" He goes, and I say, "Okay, come here. We'll go find your mom and dad." He goes, "Okay." And so I pick him up and I start going down the hallway and looking for doors that are open that maybe he left open. And finally, I find a room where the TV's still on. And I knock, and the door swings open a little, and his mom and dad are in there, like, "Oh my gosh, we thought he was asleep. How did he get out of bed?" I'm like, "We're so sorry." It's like, "Sorry, I got to be a hero. This was awesome." Here you go. This is one of my. How often do you get a chance to do a genuine good deed? So it's not a world for good deeds. When you get them, you got to jump on them. But yeah.
So speaking of heroes. I went through the worst year of my life last year, death of mother, selling your childhood home, everything punched into 1 year. And talking about sustained superior performance, it's also in the rereading that you help people through the Dresden Files, because if I hadn't had the Dresden Files to read, I probably, would have lost it
well,
during that time. So there, you got to be a hero again, and you didn't even know it.
Yay! Although really, I was mostly just trying to make sure I could pay for my kids' school. But but I'm really glad it had an extraneous effect. And that's another thing. Is one of the things I do when I write the Dresden Files is I write them to be reread. So I try and drop in little bits of dialogue and stuff that'll have a different meaning once you know the end of the story as compared to what you've read when you've already read the beginning. And that's a tremendous amount of fun. I also give those a lot as answers to questions from readers, you know, so that, you know, there'll be a different answer after you've read Skidgate than it was before you. Because right now I've got people convinced that Murphy's going to be a Knight of the Cross based on, you know, the answers I've given. Obviously this is going to happen. Jim already said this. And it's like, oh, you didn't read that closely enough, dude. I swear I'm 12 years old. Yeah.
When you're writing, so you talked about the structure of an individual novel, but you're also writing a series and you have a planned ending for this series. So is it the same idea in terms of structure for the overall story arc? And each individual piece is like a brick to the overall story arc? How does it work when you're planning the big picture?
Okay, you have to understand that I've never written a story 23 books long before. And I couldn't find anybody else who'd written a story 23 books long before either, except for the guy who did the Robotech books. And he had movies. So what I've done in planning for the story is I've just taken the same shape and expanded it. So each book is essentially a scene of the overall story. So each book should be giving you a necessary piece that you need to get the not just the story world, but the characters to the spots where I need them for the big finale. Because I'm one of the writers who thinks that I very strongly believe in creative laziness. So it is very important to me to that everything I do, I'm doing with something in mind, that I'm not ever just writing something that is just a throwaway bit of something that's not going to be very important later. Not that you can do that with every single word, but for the most part, if I'm spending time on something, it's because it's important. Because I'm too lazy to do it for things that aren't important. So hopefully, I completely just spaced out on where I was going with that. But hopefully, by the time we get to the end of the big overall story, all the pieces that I've been laying out along the way, it'll make more sense from the end of it. And then hopefully the whole story along the way will read slightly differently once you get to the end than it did, you know, as you were going through it, as it was being created. And hopefully it won't feel ripped off by the way that feels. There probably will be some people who do. I know I got to the end of Alera, and there were people who felt completely ripped off by the end of the Codex Alera, and by the big confrontation at the end. They were waiting for an epic sword fight between Tavi and the Board Queen, and instead they got a samurai duel that was, you know, one sword stroke long, and they felt completely cheated by that. But what can you do? Not everybody's going to like what you do, and that's another thing you have to understand as a writer.
So you know the whole story arc, and we know what the next book is going to be called after Skidgate, and we know what the final trilogy is going to be called. Do you know the titles of the books in between, or just? I know the subject matter of the books in between. The titles are a little bit more flexible. But I know what the subject matter of the next book is. The book after Peace Talks is going to be. I know the title of that one. It's going to be Mirror Mirror. And because, you know, I'm writing an alternate universe story, and I'm not even going to bother. Of course, I'm stealing it from Star Trek. That's not the point. All right, there's going to be goatees and eye patches and everything. So. No, she's just like she is in the regular universe, only sluttier. You know, it's a mirror story. But anyway, so, but yeah, that's going to be a fun one, because that's going to be, how would the world have been different if Harry had made one choice differently? So that would be like Harry with the goatee that we saw as a kind of subconscious. Yeah, his subconscious.
Well, yeah, but it's going to be a different character, because he's going to be Dresden as he would have been if he'd made one choice differently, and the fallout from that affected his life.
Hats are important.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this guy will wear a hat. That'll be the big difference.
It's a life decision that he made. He was looking at a hat and he was like, should I or shouldn't I?
Yeah.
I think I will.
You know, in this case, it'll be the biggest decision at the end of Gray's Peril. And you'll get to see how his world is different because of that, and how he's the kind of person who does things like summon copies of himself from an alternate reality so he can kill himself conveniently for a while and disappear. And except he's going to summon the wrong Harry Dresden, the troublemaking Harry Dresden, who had different choices, and things are going to be, they're going to go just as well for Harry as they always do. So, so that'll be a fun story to write. I'm having a tremendous amount of fun looking forward to that. That's another one of those stories I've been waiting to write for years and years and years and years, and finally I get to, because I've got enough material for it to make a difference. But it won't be one of those stories that's good for new people to be introduced into, like Skin Game is. Skin Game is a great story if people haven't read it before, for them to take notice and go, oh, okay, well, this is kind of what this series is about. Supernatural hijinks.
Question, on that note, what are good entry points for people who just, you say, hey, you know you need to read this?
Okay, the worst entry point to the series is probably Stormfront. And that is the book that I wrote when I knew the least about writing. And unfortunately, that's the entry point most people have. Probably the best place to come in is Deadbeat. That was written to be, for me, that was written to be read by somebody who had never noticed the series before and was just picking it up, because that was the first hardback. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna restructure the story and write it in such a way that you don't have to be a veteran of the series. That was why I introduced Butters as a major character there, because Butters was a great guy to have on stage because he didn't know what was going on and he'd keep asking Harry what was happening, so Harry could keep explaining things to him, and through Butters to the reader. Free writing craft people, that's another craft thing, is keeping an idiot on board to ask questions. So the idiot asks questions so that you can answer the idiot, and that way the reader gets to all this information they need for the story without feeling like the idiot. Because you've got somebody else doing that for them. But anyway, so that was where I designed that to be like that, and then I think you could probably come into Turncoat pretty well. I think you probably Skin Game pretty well.
Thank you.
Oh, sure.
A statement more than a question, but since you mentioned that you think Stormfront was one of the worst books to come in on the series, what happened was I got introduced to the series by my boyfriend David, who basically said, here you go, this is the worst book in the series. And I'm like, why would you tell me that? You want me to read this series and you say that this is the worst book in the series? And he's like, just read it, trust me. And I get to the end of it and I'm like, that was freaking awesome! What are you talking about? This was the worst book in the series. And he's like, read the next one. And I kept going, and then I was just like, yeah, you were right. They're really stupid now.
It's important as a writer that you always try and write a book that is a little bit beyond what you're completely sure you can do. Because that's the only way you can grow and keep trying to expand your skills and try and get better.
Is that why you do alternate series?
Well, it's not why I do alternate series, but it was important to me to write something other than just first person stuff, because I wanted to expand what I can do as a storyteller. And it's sort of like when you're studying one martial art, and it's okay if you want to be really, really good at Aikido, but you know what? You might be really well advised to go out and study some Kempo to go along with your Aikido, or some Judo to go along with your Aikido. Because any one perspective is only going to give you one certain look at things. And if you start getting more perspectives, you start understanding better how the entire thing works. So the thing I really love about writing in third person is that it gives you so many more options as to how you can present the drama of your story, which is another way of saying it gives you so much more rope with which you can hang yourself. But that's part of the learning process, and occasionally you get to rough spots in the book where you realize, I'm telling this story, but I'm not quite sure what camera angle this is from, and you find yourself writing, a certain part of the story 5 or 6 different times from various points of view before you finally find the right one. And I had a big stuck moment at the end of going into the end of Sitter's Buyers here, but I finally got past it, and I was like, woohoo! And then it was like my teeth exploded, and then I had to go to WyrdCon. So, but I need to get back to it so I can finish the book, and I'm very excited for writing it because I can see the rest of it in my head now, and it's burning a hole in my imagination. So,
in writing Codex Alera and Sitter's Buyers, did you ever feel hampered by the fact that you can't use modern medium like you could in Dresden Files?
Yeah, and occasionally it gets really annoying. But then I thought to myself, but on the other hand, it's fantasy. You can invent your own idiot.
Yeah.
And so I can start, I can have my characters, swearing and creating idiom that makes sense from the story world that they're in. So.
So, you've mentioned that you do a lot of research for your stories. I mean, it's especially evident in things like the Joseph Files, where you have Chicago and it comes to life for people that either know the area or that don't, and that they trust your vision of what you presented. So there's writing what you know, and then writing what you're not necessarily familiar with so that you can actually be a better writer. But at what point...
Yeah, that whole write what you know thing.
Yeah, but... so what about a comfort level? Because if you write just what's comfortable for you, you're never going to want to do research, you're never going to expand your borders as a writer. But have you ever written something and been kind of like, I'm sort of uncomfortable writing this?
Yeah, like every female viewpoint ever. Viewpoint character ever that I've written. I had to, you have to go, golly, I don't know if I'm doing this or not. And then, but on the other hand, it kind of gets you into a different headspace, and you're looking at something from a different perspective, or trying to. And hopefully I'll get better at it. But at the same time, your writing perspectives from any kind of alien perspective, it's going to be the same way. I'm writing from one of the characters in Cinder Spires is the cat, and I'm writing from the cat's perspective for a lot of the time, which is surprisingly comfortable. But anyway, so
I think Isana is one of the best female characters written by a male author I've ever read.
Oh, thank you. I guess. But Isana was not difficult for me to write, because Isana was somebody who was motivated entirely by the welfare of the kid, and I know what that feels like. So that was not hard for me to project elsewhere. I had a son who was born when I was 19 years old, and I've been a father longer than I've been not a father in my life. I'm only 42, so I know how deeply that changes your world and what you're willing to do for that child. So for Isana to do that, and she didn't always make the right choices, and neither did I. But you do your best, and hopefully your kid survives without too many scars.
You say you like to torture your characters, your readers.
Yes, it's the readers I like to torture. The characters are just how I reach the readers.
But of course there are those scenes where, as a reader, we're going, those heartbreaking moments. Are you sitting there
You can cry some more, and that'll just make me smile.
I think we could all do. And there are certain parts where you just, like when Harry and Maggie, he sees, and Mouse, and, seriously, that was heartbreaking for me. Anyway.
Skinny, it's even better. Marsters was crying, and Rothfuss was crying.
See, yeah. You
make Spike cry?
I made the vampire cry. I made the weird cry.
Did you cry when you wrote it? Or are you just gleefully going, well, this is going to make them cry?
I'm gleefully going into I mean, really.
The answer when you ask that question.
No, honestly, I mean, when I'm doing stuff that I know people are gonna be into, when I'm confident that they're gonna read it and be going, oh my God, I'm sitting there going, I sound like Renfield from the original Dracula. Or I mean, there's several scenes like that I do that is gonna grab people and just twist, and in a number of different ways. There's multiple scenes that do that, and I love writing those because it's like, oh yeah, people are gonna flip out when I'm writing this. This scene is the equivalent of the slow motion sad music action scene where somebody's about to die, and I know it, and they know it, and they're gonna be like, oh no, and it's like, yes. I love thinking of that. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm a cold-blooded professional, and I calculate these things precisely.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah.
So, building on that, has there ever been something that you've known you had to do for the story that you haven't wanted to do?
No, because that's the whole point of being a writer is I get to do what I want to do. Auctor non corrupt. author don't care. And that's, okay, I mean, I still live from Honey Badger, but that's not the point. No, I mean, there's never really, I mean, there are times when I go, oh, this is going to be tough. You know, where I'm in the middle of writing a big finale and going, oh yeah, Zoot is going to die, wow. But I didn't actually know that until a couple of chapters ahead of time. And then I went, oh yeah, this is the way it has to fall together. And, you know, so when you get to that, and there are times when it's tough, where it's like, okay, well, you know what, this character, I'm going to have to say goodbye to this character now. Let's say goodbye in the coolest way possible, and that's what you have to think about it, because you got to understand that everything ends, and stories end and characters end, and you just got to make sure that the ending is a worthy one, and that's what will resonate with the reader. Yeah, right here.
Like 5 questions ago, you just mentioned briefly creating idiom that fits with the world that the characters are in, and I want to do that in the next draft of the project that is finished. Do you have any tips for making that fit? You've got to put yourself in the world. You've got to know your world well enough that you can sit in a chair and look around at it and be there. And once you do that, you can understand that, okay, well, in the world of Alera, when there's battles, there are always these crows that show up everywhere to eat, and they therefore become an omen of bad things. You know, because their past history as such is that, you know, they were basically a colleague death cult for about 1,000 years. Basically, the Alerans were, before they actually settled into something more like civilization. And these crows were always an omen of death, were omnipresent, and so, you know, of course, they're going to be a curse word for the Alerans, because, you know, they're a meaning of terrible, awful things. And you've got to be able to look around at the world and figure it out. And for, you know, people are going to make jokes based on the world that they live in. And so you've got to be able to make watercrafter jokes when you're hanging out in Alera. And you've got to be able to get all that stuff and use it. So mainly it's just a matter of being able to mentally project yourself to that place, which does not leave you totally the most fit individual for getting along in the real world. And that's been my problem. Basically, I get paid to hang out with my invisible friends and write down what they say. And the hazard of that is that, you know, they get really upset when you. The handy thing is that when you owe people money, they're really good about telling you that you owe them money, which is good, because otherwise I forget. You know, so I'll get this message from, I'll get this message. We're going to turn off your internet if you don't pay us. Oh, that would be awful. Hang on, I'll get that taken care of right away. You know, but it's a hazard of the profession. But did you have a question about that?
Oh, when you were talking about characters dying and how these affect you. I know I'm in the minority when I wish more of your characters, given the circumstances, probably should have been off. Are there any characters you wish you had killed and have yet survived?
Let me think. I'm kind of sad about one of the villains that fit it in Skin Game. Because it was necessary for what they were doing, but it was a great villain, and I really loved how it was set up. Would you just stop it? Oh, Jesus. I saved you, fine. But no, I mean, I don't really have too many regrets on that front. I follow the way of the warrior, no regrets. And if I do have a regret about not killing somebody, mostly I'll just go, well, how can I kill that guy? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I could make it even more spectacular now. So, you know, that's not really a problem for me.
One of the things that was described in the description of the panel presentation thing was, like they were saying, breaking up with a story so that you could move on. How did you take that pause from Dresden when you wanted to write Codex Alera, even if you were actually simultaneously writing, but mentally you had to switch gears?
I'm never simultaneously writing. I'm always working on either one or the other. And by the time I get done with the Dresden story, I'm kind of sick of that guy. So it's a relief to get elsewhere. And the last time I didn't have another story to go to when I was done with the Dresden book, you know, I killed him and made him solve his own murder as a ghost, and then, you know, had him show up as Mav's hitman. And so it's like, you know what? Things are just going so far downhill for Harry. I really need to get to another story. And so that I can get a break from this guy and be a little bit less psychotic about it when I get back. But those 3 books I kind of wrote nonstop. And that was probably detrimental to Harry. They probably came out harsher and darker than they would have if I had other stuff to write in between. But at the same time, by the time I get done writing another book, then I can get back to Harry's viewpoint again. And it's like, oh, back in the saddle with Dresden. Okay, this is comfortable and familiar, and now I'm happy to be writing. So hopefully we'll get back to a little bit more of that pace, because that suits me well. It might take me a little bit longer to get things written because my writing environment has changed so much since I was doing the early Dresden books, but that'll be okay. We'll still make sure it's a good book for everybody. So.
How much has your outline for the final 3 books changed through the course of the series, and do you like try to hold yourself to that outline?
It hasn't changed at all. I still have the same one. It's working. I'm not going to break it. I mean, it's not broken. I'm not going to have to go try and fix it. The 25-year-old me was stupid about a lot of things, but about the overall vision of the story, he seems to have been doing all right. So I'm not willing to question him at this point. About everything else, but not the story.
I'm scared you're going to kill Butters.
You're scared I'm going to kill Butters?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, I mean, I don't want to give spoilers or anything, but damn, poor Butters.
You're handing him material to
Look, I'm just saying, I'm leaving town on Wednesday, so, you know, you're only going to have a few hours to read the book and find me in exact vengeance. So.
He'll be at Redondo Beach, people. We know where to find him.
Thank you for that. Anything else? I mean, I think we're nearing time here, but where are we on time-wise? Yeah, 2 minutes, so, yes.
You mentioned there were 7 story plots, and you named 2 of them. Could you quickly tell us the others?
No.
Okay.
Yes, Sleepy Dopey Duck. The only ones I write are Quest. I mean, there's a bunch of different stories. I think the revenge story is a specific story type. I'm trying to remember the other ones offhand.
There's a guy that wrote a book on them, and I don't know if these are the same 7 that you were thinking of, but I found Rebirth, Overcoming the Monster, Rags to Riches, Voyage and Return, Comedy and Tragedy.
No, I think totally differently than that guy. They were on a slightly different model, but I'll have to go look at my old notebooks from college and see if I can find them and put them on LiveJournal or something. But for me, the only one that mattered was Quest, and so that was the one I started writing. So I write Quest books. Okay, well, I guess we're about up on time. So thank you very much for putting up with me this morning. And,